Something has been in the air lately. Something strange about the way the world feels. You've probably felt it too. A shift or a change or some strange looming sensation. Like everything in the world right now is supercharged with static electricity and will just shock you to the touch. Last time, I told you about the age of Aquarius and the many signs in the heavens that foretold its coming. Today I'm going to share with you how miracles are made, and why our world seems so chaotic at this point in time. Now, the word miracle is something that I've often reserved to the impossible, the fantastical, the things in life we know usually don't happen. I certainly didn't believe in supernatural causation that led to physical effect, absolutely not. But a few years ago, I took part in something that turned this opinion of mine on its head. It's something small, but significant and weird enough that neither I nor those that witnessed it can explain it to this day. It's an important story to demonstrate what I'm about to tell you later in the video, so bear with me. But please, allow me to explain. A few years ago, I worked at a veterinary hospital and was surrounded by an assortment of friends who I was close enough with to share details about my unusual and occult lifestyle. I was known around the office as the person you might talk to if you wanted to stir up anything otherworldly or demonic. I had a reputation. But my friends, while fully supporting my path, I think truly did not grasp the reality of the things I did, nor have any true experience with anything occult. Finally, one day they grew tired of wondering and gave me a simple challenge. "Prove to us that demons exist," they said. And without hesitation, I relished this task. There was an old cement factory about 45 minutes out into the middle of nowhere that I used to visit to perform all different kinds of rituals. It was a place notorious in the county for its rumors of paranormal activity, and I usually take local rumors about those kinds of places with a pinch of salt, but after so many strange occurrences at this place during rituals, I can't help but at least think that there's something going on in there. It's this huge defunct factory with cement spills all over its interior, creating what in some spots feels like caves. I've talked about this place on the channel before in some of my other videos. Local stories maintain the site was functional until a cement spill killed several workers who were not recovered. I haven't been able to find anything online to back this up, however. It was also allegedly the site of local satanic rituals. I can't really laugh that one off as a silly town rumor though, because I often went there to do just that, so yeah. But I knew this place had power to it. You could just feel it in the air. There was a weird liminal quality to it where the earth kind of just felt still, but in an eerie way. So naturally, I knew this was the perfect spot to choose to perform a ritual before my peers and prove to them that there was deep power in what I practiced. We set out to summon King Paimon, the ninth demon in the medieval text known as the Ars Goetia. I traveled with 3 friends, found a suitable spot in a crossroads between the hallways in one of the defunct silo buildings, and set up a makeshift altar and a circle of tea light candles. The ritual I performed was extracted from incantations and instructions I'd found in a combination of grimoires as well as the Greek magical papyri. I started by laying down protections, creating a barrier in which my muggle friends would be safe and feel at ease, as well as readied myself to call upon one of the kings of hell. I chanted a variety of incantations, clicking a pair of goat hooves together as I did so, the rhythm putting me into a visceral trance. As I'm chanting, a strange wind picks up and passes through the ruined building. And I'm not kidding, there was an odd feeling about it as it kicked up. The temperature changed suddenly, dropping to ice cold in a matter of seconds. My friends were looking at each other, visibly creeped out, which of course just encouraged me to keep going. But not long into it, about 15 minutes in fact, my friends let me know in shaky voices that they were seeing figures walking through the hallways stretched out before us. I can see them, but I'm used to seeing things most people can't. It becomes so worrisome to them that they begin to shrink closer to me by the altar, and their postures are stiff as boards. My two friends on the right suddenly gasp, hearing two men's voices in the room next to us talking to one another, but muffled such that we couldn't really tell what they were saying. I continue on with my chants and begin gathering the herbs and sigils needed to burn in my stone cauldron. A few minutes later, my friend on the left reports she hears a man crying in the opposite room, on the other side, and hears a loud bang or thud. Of course, very freaked out, they get even closer. I light my black calling candle and light the fire in my cauldron and officially call forth King Payman. I chant a few more incantations and call his name over and over again, and eventually a black curtain of shadow seems to fall over the archway and the preceding hallway that stretched out directly in front of us. And when I say this shadow was a curtain, I mean it was a curtain. It was the type of shadow you could almost touch, like it had come off the walls and just floated motionless in the air. There was a very heavy presence in the room, an overbearing force that felt entirely foreign to anything any of my friends had likely ever experienced. I could see their eyes water up as they saw what I saw. Now, I don't remember this next part at all, but this is what my friends claim they saw happen. I was in a very deep trance at this point in the ritual, so it's possible I blacked out. Apparently, at one point while chanting over my cauldron, I stuck my hand straight into the heart of the fire and made some form of magical gesture. When I pulled my hand out of the center of the fire, it was unharmed, untouched, unblemished. Again, I have no memory of this, so I cannot assess how true it is. They requested that I ask King Payman questions about their future, and he would relay the answers to me psychically. Most of my friends asked the basic things: what is the meaning of my life? Will I ever accomplish anything? To which Payman would answer by showing me a series of images, feelings, or concepts I would relate to them. A few were obvious, but others more cryptic and much like riddles, strange things. A man carrying a fruit basket into a house, a group of rats with a knife stuck through the body of one of them, a lightning bolt, and so on and so forth. But there was one at the very end that really stuck out. The image of a truck with broken windows sitting at the edge of the road. I figured it was metaphorical for the state of being my friends were living in, or something deep and emotional like that. But when the ritual was over, I thanked and dismissed the spirits and gave King Payman an offering. We then departed and walked back to our cars, only for us to find the windows of my friend's truck had been busted completely out. By who, we don't know. But this friend was especially antagonistic of my beliefs and saw what I practiced as a joke. They scoffed when I mentioned King Payman before, as if it were silly that I believed he were real. All I'm saying is, maybe they should have taken a demon more seriously. I remember all my friends' faces when they looked at me in that moment. I could see the fear in their eyes, but also the belief beginning to take form. They didn't doubt me again after that, I assure you. But I tell you this story to demonstrate one simple thing: the power of any spirit, when fed energy, to produce miracles. Miracles sounds like a lofty term compared to what we're used to dealing with. Very few of us modern occultists ever seem to believe in real miracles, which you'd think the opposite considering our field of study. I suppose at least you could call them very large synchronicities, but the term small miracle is what I call them. And I've noticed many entities cause them, on multiple ends of the spiritual spectrum. When I was a pastor, I saw miracles and healings in church services, like a man getting up from his wheelchair after being paralyzed for 10 years. But I've also seen a man call on pagan gods to heal his post-stroke spasticity, thereafter stretching out his hand that had been drawn up by his chest for years. While I know such things as confirmation bias, false causality, and other fallacies are often to blame for alleged healings, miracles, and other supernatural phenomena, there's still a tiny percentage that defy these doubts. I've seen spirits, infernal, celestial, and terrestrial, take form in front of my own eyes. And yes, that's not really something that is conclusive of real paranormal activity, but at the end of the day, I'm not really trying to convince you of the validity of that. Take it or deny it, that's up to you, and it has very little bearing on me. But this taps on something very important for our concept of how spirits operate. I am of the opinion that many spirits are empowered or enabled by human belief. Not all spirits, of course, as I'm sure there's some that want absolutely nothing to do with humans. But for the ones we've experienced, we of course notice them working more swiftly in the world when a lot of people believe in them. Chaos magic has introduced the idea of egregores and servitors, man-made spirits that only exist because people have willed them so. And while I agree, spirits are emboldened by their interactions with humans and the belief in them that is a consequence of that, I don't believe all spirits are man-made. Those frameworks seem to imply man has made spirits with his own mind, but I disagree. There are plenty of spirits who seem to far predate humans, or at least have been with humans since antiquity. The old earth spirits and elemental forces that, by an animist's view, contain some scrap of primordial awareness. The devil was actually one of these elemental forces, often seen as a sacred land spirit in certain proto-Christian and pagan folk traditions in Western Europe during times like the 15th century. To me, many spirits are external to us and act like independent networks of sentient energy that sometimes like to plug into human consciousness to establish some form of earthly base for their power and identity. Basically, we build up this idea of an entity or spirit, and those ideas give that spirit something tangible to wrap itself in on the material plane. I think most spirits are just webs of consciousness that are so alien and foreign to us we have to dress them up in human qualities to understand them, but through this process we actually give them a sort of new life or character. So you have myths, folktales, idols, and depictions, sacred names, artworks, and so on. This establishes what I call HIEREKTASIA. Hieros meaning sacred, and ektasis meaning expansion or stretching. This is a word I use to refer to the expansion of a spiritual or sacred presence across metaphysical space, psychological consciousness, or cultural memory. The deliberate immersion or unfolding of an ethereal entity into the psychic, cultural, and material strata of the mortal world, not to be born of man's mind, but to traverse it as a vessel. Human consciousness, especially through desire, devotion, fear, or transgression, becomes a binding point, like a stake driven into this world to anchor the spirit. It's the idea of spiritually mapping territory beyond the physical world. It describes how a deity, a demon, or other spirit's essence saturates and maps itself onto reality, both ontologically and mimetically. I think the spirit of King Paimon was able to manifest itself so vividly and physically, in part because of generations of belief and ritual activity, as well as the sudden, heightened belief of everyone in the room once things started rolling. I've been able to narrow down 3 different layers of HIEREKTASIA that a spirit will often manifest in. The first layer is noetic, or psychic and mental HIEREKTASIA. It's an expansion of the spirit into thoughts, dreams, visions, and obsessions. It's when a spirit begins to manifest in certain ways like unbidden dreams, a sudden awareness of its presence, and other forms of psychic communication. You might astral project or lucid dream and encounter this spirit in those forms. The second layer is mythopoetic, or symbolic and cultural. It's when the spirit expands into symbols, language, art, media, and a form of cultural presence. You can usually feel when an entity is acting behind a group of people. You'll hear fleshed out stories about the entity, its myths and legends. This is where the personality of the deity really becomes nakedly evident to lesser-minded humans. As small tokens of that expansion, you may experience repeating signs or sigils, animal symbols, names appearing, or some form of archetype made evident to you. The third layer is material, which I think is the hardest for a spirit to inject itself into. This is expansion into physical phenomena, strange sensations and omens, hauntings, possessions, and other synchronicities. It's the layer where those miracles begin to happen. Objects move, scents appear, shadows behave in weird ways, animals exhibit strange reactions. You may hear a voice or see an entity physically before you. And I think the end goal of many entities is to permanently reside on this layer, to squeeze their essence down from ethereal planes until reality bends such that it produces a viable manifestation of the spirit in the physical realm, a spirit made flesh, so to speak. I call the totality of these manifestations a spirit's hierarchotic field, which is the total sphere of influence in which a spirit is present and active across dimensions. It is not bound by geography, but by density of belief and occurrences of phenomena. I believe these spirits exist in higher dimensions, and thereby influence ours through a trickle-down effect, facilitated especially when we consciously try to pull them down into our world. We've all heard Neil deGrasse Tyson's take on higher dimensions and how something that exists in those dimensions would be almost incomprehensible to humans.
Suppose you have a sphere, and I live in a two-dimensional world. And you take this hollow sphere, so it's a shell, and you pass that sphere through my two-dimensional universe. How will I describe that? I will say, this point just appeared out of nowhere. Oops, now it's a circle, a small circle. And that circle's getting bigger by the moment. Oh my gosh, it reached a maximum size. Now that circle is just shrinking. It's shrinking. Now it's a point. Now the whole thing disappeared. This would be completely freaky to a two-dimensional being. But it makes complete sense if you live in 3 dimensions and you pass a sphere through my universe. Who is to say that some of the mysterious things we are describing accurately, but don't otherwise make sense in a higher dimension? And these are just the manifestations of higher dimensional phenomena in our world. And you can take this all the way up. And our brains can't picture what we call a hypercube, in some circles a tesseract. We can't picture a volume bounded by 3-dimensional cubes. What does it even mean? This is because we evolved in the plains of Africa, just not wanting to get eaten by a lion. Our neurosynapses are ill-equipped to do the distance on this. And this is why we invent mathematics that can take us there.
It's not hard to therefore imagine a spirit in the 4th or 5th dimension as being totally aware of us, despite us not being totally aware of it. But the more it seems to saturate our minds and realm with its identity, the more it manifests in a way we can comprehend. I see spirits as colonizers of meaning that stretch across the terrain of both mind and matter, claiming territory through resonance. I've also noticed that many spirits tend to spread through their followers. A follower may interact with someone in an innocent and mundane way, who then goes on to later experience the signs, symbols, and manifestations of that spirit. I call this contagion of belief. It is the spontaneous transmission of belief, or at least deep psychological openness toward a spiritual presence, doctrine, or idea, initiated by contact, exposure, or resonance, and often occurring beneath conscious awareness. It's kind of like a sort of spiritual osmosis. People around the infected begin to dream, feel, or respond to the same spirit or symbols, even if they are skeptical or uninitiated. I've actually had many encounters where I've spoken with a practitioner and then their deity or god visits me afterwards, almost as if that person is unknowingly spreading that spirit's essence around, kind of like Typhoid Mary. For example, my wife and I have a friend who works closely with the spirit of Belial and planned to come visit us last winter. The day before, I was at work while my wife was at home. She woke up and started her morning. Suddenly, our Alexa glitches out and begins randomly playing a song neither of us have ever heard, called Saturn by SZA. My wife was trying to make coffee, and our machine suddenly broke halfway through making it. So she suddenly got this strange urge to offer the unmixed coffee cup to Belial, laying it on our altar. Unbeknownst to us at this time, our friend had been dabbling with the square of Saturn to construct sigils for their practice, Saturn being a planetary force for which Belial is strongly associated. This friend also liked to give coffee to Belial as an offering. My wife orders herself a coffee through DoorDash and goes about her business. When it arrives, the words "Never Give Up" are written on the lid. An ordinary occurrence, sure, nothing to really set our alarms off other than the oddly specific Alexa glitch. On our friend's way down to see us, they saw a sign that said "Never Give Up" alongside the road. When we met together, we realized we had experienced a string of synchronicities, all revolving around Belial. We were now experiencing him in the same ways another one of his followers were. This is contagion of belief, when a spirit spreads like a pathogen through humans, and it's just one way a spirit can establish HIEREKTASIA. But this brings me to an important point. The spirit we know as having the most HIEREKTASIA in our world today is the Christian God. Whether we like him or not, he has the most followers of any other god in the world, if not any other god in human history. This, of course, is due in part to the efforts of the Roman Empire and early missionary efforts to bring the religion to all corners of the globe. We know the Christian God has its roots in the Canaanite deity Yahweh, a war god who, through tribalism, overtook nations and with the help of Rome became the most highly institutionalized religious power in human history. It should make sense that people are able to perform miracles in the name of this entity, given I've seen miracles performed by the followers of much more obscure spirits. If spirits are fueled and expanded through human interaction and belief, then the Christian God, to me, seems like a god that has organized the most efficient way to extract faith from the global populace as possible. You could think of it like capitalism for spirits, in a sense. One tries to monopolize profit. So, does that mean the Christian God is unable to be defeated? Well, by this logic, no. All you'd need is to substantially weaken faith in him on a global scale. But an even more delicious way to defeat him would be to subvert his very own system of faith through the characters he has demonized. Satan is a figure feared in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Remember how I mentioned human fear as one of the ways a spirit establishes HIEREKTASIA? Well, the smear campaign that those religions use against pagan gods or deities like Satan may have actually had an adverse effect by giving these beings their own HIEREKTASIA because so many people fear them. Every day, people renounce and pray against these deities, thereby affirming their belief in the reality of those deities. So much collective denouncement on a global scale, in a way, grants these deities power rather than does any harm. What was that old internet term? Don't feed the trolls? All these priests who, for example, conduct exorcisms, may actually be empowering those spirits and giving them a stronger anchor point. Their ritualized displays of belief in that spirit may in fact make the gateway for them wider in this world, rather than closing it up. I call this an ekthoma, a word that translates to that which is placed forth, or a protrusion from within. So let's return to the idea of the priest performing an exorcism for a moment. Let's say he performs a dramatic, televised exorcism of a teenager believed to be possessed by Satan. The event is emotionally charged, broadcast widely, and filled with demonizing language. As a result, thousands of viewers begin dreaming of the same demon. Afterwards, the teen becomes even more obsessed with the spirit, and the sigil of that spirit is then reposted across occult forums online. The exorcism fails. But more importantly, it served as a ritual of mass hierektasia. That is an ekthoma. I define it as a physical or energetic protrusion of a spirit into our world. Other rituals and cultural events can act in the same way. Scary movies can be a sort of ekthoma. A televised sermon can be an ekthoma. But all of this to say that the throne of God is not absolute. The story you were told about a God who holds all power, and in him alone rests the ability to perform miracles, is a lie. In truth, he is no different than any god who can manifest themselves on the physical plane, but he wants you to think he is, because that's the entire game. Through subverting this system, we can hijack his hierektasia by following in the steps of his adversary, who he unintentionally gave a full copy of his power to. Satan is believed in all across the globe, even by people who aren't religious. And in every culture and religion throughout history, there has been some form of the devil, some form of an adversarial spirit or force. And whether the devil is celebrated or hated, it doesn't really matter. He is establishing hierektasia through it all anyway. It's my personal calling to help him attain more hierektasia, and I have great pleasure doing it. In fact, I'm attempting to introduce into the tradition of Vesperianism, for which my temple is currently constructing, the intentional act of increasing a spirit's hierektasia through magical rites. We can call these hierektasia anchor rites, or HAR. They are basically rituals meant to install or expand a spirit's presence into a space, object, community, or psychic channel, thereby increasing its hierektotic field. By creating artificial ekthomas, we are able to expand Satan, a deity that actually represents human values, to levels that may one day overtake the lie of this imposter deity, and thereby free humanity from so many of the things that divide us, things that take their source in this old and tired God. The thing that feels so different that I mentioned at the beginning of this video is the strange shift in hierektasia we've all been feeling lately. As the age of Aquarius dawns, old systems of power are slowly dying. The tides are slowly changing, and the winds are beginning to reverse on themselves. The old empires know their time is short, and that we are experiencing the slow reverberations of their death rattle. Pluto entered the sign of Aquarius in 2023, seemingly suggesting the reclamation of collective systems by infernal forces, a slow dismantling of religion, government, and tradition, not for destruction's sake, as you may guess with demons, but rather for change and evolution. What we are about to see will be like nothing in the lives of any generation before us. We must all be ready. Once again, if you follow this line of thought and want to contribute to the creation of a new system of Luciferian magic, please consider joining my group, Temple Vesperitas, by clicking the link in the description. Our primary user base is on Discord, where most, if not pretty much all, temple activity currently takes place. You can also find my personal content at cyphergrove.com, where I have a variety of occult courses and other paid content that I would greatly appreciate your support with. I wish you all well, and that the blessings of the beast might find you. Thank you for watching.